Welcome to Building the Future, hosted by Kevin Horick. With millions of listeners a month, Building the Future has quickly become one of the fastest rising programs, with a focus on interviewing startups, entrepreneurs, investors, CEOs, and more. The radio and TV show airs in 15 markets across the globe, including Silicon Valley. For full showtimes, past episodes, or to sponsor the show, please visit buildingthefutureshow.com.
Welcome back to the show. Today we have Mo Elshazly. He's a cardiologist and co-founder of Ember Medical. Mo, welcome to the show.
Hey, Kevin, how are you? Thank you for having me on your show, and happy holidays to you and your listeners.
Yeah, of course. You too, man. I'm excited to have you on the show today. I think what you guys are doing at Ember Medical is very important and much needed. But maybe before we get into that, let's get to know you a little bit better and start off with where you grew up.
Yes, sure. I would love to chat about that a little bit. So
Sure.
I'm originally from Egypt, but I grew up in Qatar.
Very cool.
I went to medical school here at Cornell.
Okay.
And yes, Cornell University has a branch in Qatar that opened up in 2001, in case
Very
anyone
cool.
was wondering.
Oh, that's interesting. That's quite cool.
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually was a part of the third batch to graduate from here.
Oh, cool.
So I graduated when I became a doctor when I was 22 years old.
Okay.
And then moved to the U.S. So then I went to did my medicine residency at Hopkins in Baltimore.
Very cool.
And then went to the Cleveland Clinic, where I did a fellowship in cardiology and cardiac electrophysiology at the Cleveland Clinic.
Okay. So what made you want to be a doctor?
It started with my father. He's a
Okay.
pediatrician.
Got you.
And my mom is a dentist, so that's how I got interested
Got you.
in medicine.
Sure.
But then, of course, as time moved by, I just felt that, I was meant to be a doctor, and I do not regret it at all.
No, that's great, man. So walk me through what exactly is Ember Medical and why did you decide to start it up?
All right. So back when I was in Baltimore in around 2012 or so, I had a neighbor 2 floors below me in my building who had a cardiac arrest.
Wow.
To make sure everyone knows what cardiac arrest is, when your heart stops pumping blood effectively and you pass out.
Okay.
And unfortunately, the ambulance got there later, around 15 minutes late.
Wow.
And it was too late, and my neighbor was dead.
Sad.
And it struck me, because, I was very frustrated because, I was there. I could have gone down, done some CPR, maybe even found a defibrillator, but I couldn't because there was no way for me to know that someone needed my help.
Sure.
And the same thing for the neighbor's family. They also didn't know what to do. They had no clue that a doctor or someone who knew how to do CPR just lived 2 floors above them.
Sure.
So that kind of frustrated me. And then fast forward, to around 2017, I was chatting with my cousin, Shadi, who is the CEO of Ember.
Okay.
And he was telling me about a story of his friend who passed out of cardiac arrest when he was 17.
Wow.
And he was telling me the story, and he was like, he passed away, and he just, his father saw him pass out in front of him, and he didn't know what to do. And
Wow.
by the time the ambulance got there, it was too late.
Wow. That's
And I
really
was like,
sad.
yeah, exactly. And I was like, you know what, Shadi, I think if someone had known how to do CPR and defibrillation was close by, they could have saved their life.
Sure.
And then this was around the time when there was this wave of technology coming out, right? So smartphones have become ubiquitous around the world.
Sure.
GPS technology was also becoming, wonderful.
Sure.
And then also Uber and other ride-sharing apps such as Lyft were becoming very popular.
Sure.
And it felt like it was the right time to kind of figure out a platform that connects people having medical emergencies to nearby medical professionals who can provide help faster than the ambulance.
Interesting.
So that seemed the right time. So we wanted to start by tackling sudden cardiac arrest. of course, because I'm a cardiologist, and it's one of the most devastating emergencies. So cardiac arrest affects around 350,000 Americans every year.
Wow.
So that is 1 every 90 seconds.
Crazy.
And to put that in perspective, 40,000 people in the US die of car accidents, and around 4,000 die of house fires. So cardiac arrest death is 10 times in magnitude more than car accidents.
Wow.
And you know what the survival rate is? Can you guess?
It's got to be pretty low.
It is 10%.
Wow.
So in the 21st century, we still have a disease that, kills around 90% of people who suffer from arrest. And it can also is very unpredictable, right? It can affect anyone, anywhere, and anytime. There's all these stories about athletes, young people having cardiac arrest, and some of them are lucky enough to have a defibrillator and a first responder close by, but most of the people are not lucky enough to have someone close by.
Interesting.
So really, then when you dive deeper into the problem, you find out that so the brain cannot survive without blood flow for more than 5 minutes.
Okay.
So if there's no blood going to the brain for more than 5 minutes, there's a very high chance you're going to be brain dead.
Wow.
And surprisingly, ambulance response times in the US and globally is around 5 to 10 minutes.
Okay. So just too late, right?
Exactly. And again, in the US, it's actually 8 to 15 minutes. So in most times, it is very late. Wow. So if you, like most other people, are relying on an ambulance to save your life, you have to think again. And we kept diving deeper into it, and we found that, it's a problem that's related to traffic, decreased funding for EMS systems.
Right.
It's always hard to get more ambulances on the road, and even if you do, you're always limited by traffic and overcrowded cities and all that stuff. Sure. So it's a problem that, unfortunately, it's not going to get any better. And then there's other layers to the problem too, but in general, that is the biggest problem.
Okay.
So we're like, what? This is a devastating problem. It can happen to anyone, anywhere, anytime. And we have the technology right now that can allow us to connect victims of sudden cardiac arrest to nearby medical professionals who can deliver CPR and defibrillation faster than an ambulance.
Wow.
And that became the essence of what we wanted to do.
Okay, so how does it exactly work?
So here's how it works. So there are multiple ways to activate our platform. So again, our platform consists of all these medical professionals. These are doctors, nurses, paramedics who know how to do CPR, high quality CPR and defibrillation.
Sure.
And think of it in this way. So we crowdsource these CPR trained individuals to cardiac arrest victims in the same way Lyft or Uber crowdsources drivers. So what happens is someone has a cardiac arrest, so passes out at home in front of his family members or on the street in front of bystanders. People would take out their phone, press kind of a help button through our app, and that takes them through one question, asking them if the patient is unconscious.
Okay.
And if the answer is yes, then what we do for them is we call 911 and simultaneously send out a message to medical professionals within a 5-minute walking distance. So they're usually people who are around, let's say in the mall or the same apartment building or close to you, or driving somewhere or in a nearby grocery store or something. And they come running to you so that they get to you and can start CPR and defibrillation before the ambulance arrives.
Okay, interesting.
So that's how we envision this working.
Okay.
And there is other ways to activate the platform through voice commands. You can also shout something like "Help Ember," and that activates the platform. And then we're also working on some methods to activate it through wearable devices like smartwatches.
Sure.
So we're trying to integrate with some smart wearable devices that can detect cardiac arrest automatically. So in case someone is alone, our system can be activated. And also, people can press the button on their smartphone, etc. on their smart wearable, etc.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I think that's really awesome that you guys are building this. But I'm curious to know where you guys are at. Can people, I know people can download the app, but where are you guys kind of at in the process right now of launching and rolling this thing out?
Yep. So we started the company in July.
Okay.
We got accepted into IndieBio Accelerator in San Francisco.
Oh, very cool, man! Congrats on that. That's huge.
Thank you. So since then we've been building the app. So now we have both apps available on both stores.
Okay.
However, what's active right now is the Medics app. So the way we're doing this is we're doing it in steps. So the first thing we're trying to do is recruit as many medical professionals as possible.
Got you. Makes sense.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, again, how Uber, Lyft started. You want to build a nice platform of drivers.
Yeah.
So that's what we're working on right now. We're focused on recruiting people in the Northern California area, particularly San Mateo County.
Got you.
And the plan is we're actually working with San Mateo EMS so that so initially what we want to do is run a pilot where they are getting most of the calls from cardiac arrest victims, right? So right now, anyone witnesses cardiac arrest calls 911.
Sure.
So what they're going to do is once they get a call from 911, they're going to send an ambulance, but at the same time, they're going to activate our platform.
Oh, very cool. That's huge.
Exactly. So we're going to send our medics to save that victim's life before the ambulance comes. And then we're going to look at how many lives we're able to save and look at how many cardiac arrests are happening and how our platform is effective. And then then the next step after that is actually opening up the patient app or the user app on the App Store for download. So what's the next step is that people will actually have the user app which can activate our platform. So phase one would be we're getting activated by EMS or 911.
Okay. Sure.
Phase two is people actually being able to use the user app to activate us and 911. And so just to make it more clear, so this is going to be kind of like the passenger app for Uber.
Okay.
That's coming next. So we're releasing the driver kind of app, if you will.
Sure.
Which is going to have medical professionals trying it out. And then once we make sure that's working well, then the next step is to release the passenger app or the user app, where usually we're going to try and sell it or give it to families of patients with cardiovascular disease.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's around 92 million people in the U.S. living with cardiovascular disease.
Wow.
And we're going to target their families so that each family will have the app on their phone. And again, in this setting of any cardiac arrest or so, they can use it to get help as quickly as possible.
Okay. So at some point, are you going to build in, maybe this is a bad example, but I know like the new Apple Watch has fall detection. Are you going to build in something along that in the smartphone, or is there a way to put a sensor on somebody's body to know if they're or if they're having a cardiac arrest, or is that just not really possible yet?
No, actually, that's a phenomenal question, and that's something that we've been thinking about since day one.
Okay.
So there are several companies out there that are working on these types of sensors, whether it's wearable devices or implantable sensors.
Gotcha.
And there is some equipment now that we can use. So what our plan was, since a lot of these companies are working on this kind of idea, what we wanted to do is actually build that platform. So if we build that platform, our value proposition would be that all these companies that are working on these cardiac arrest detection devices, such as Apple Watch, for example, or other devices, once they build their device, they would still want to work with us because we provide the rapid response that is faster than EMS. So right now, what Apple does is if it detects a fall, which could be due to various reasons, one of them is cardiac arrest.
Sure.
What happens is if the person does not respond for a minute or so, it automatically calls 911.
Right.
However, you're still left with the whole problem of 911 being
fair enough.
too late. So we're working on, integrating with several platforms and plus minus working on our own kind of wearable if nothing else works out well. But so far, right now, there is nothing that has been proven in studies to work well for cardiac arrest. but this is our plan in the future.
Got you. Okay. Well, and I guess at the end of the day, and even if it works, maybe not 100% of the time, but if it works some of the time, that's still better than never, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
And then our platform is interesting too because we're also paying the medical professionals for every response.
Okay. So how does that
at
work?
some point, yeah. So what happens is once they respond to the arrest and do CPR and defibrillation until the ambulance comes in, then they get paid around $500 or so.
Wow. So where does that money come from?
So eventually what we want to do is, as the user app kind of works, what we want to do is, if we prove that our platform works and saves lives and saves money, because actually what people don't realize is that cardiac arrest costs directly around $2.6 billion a year.
Wow.
That's direct costs related to hospitalization.
Sure.
And then actually there is a paper that was published that used a specific calculation that the Department of Transportation uses to calculate the cost of lives lost to car accidents.
Okay.
So they use that same calculation to calculate the cost of lives lost due to cardiac arrest for patients or for individuals who are less than 50 years old.
Okay.
And they found that it's around $400 billion. So that's related to taxes that these people could have paid, et cetera, et cetera. So actually the cost of cardiac arrest, the burden of cardiac arrest to society is tremendous. So as we do pilots that prove that we're saving lives and we're saving money for insurance companies and so on, the way we see this is that insurance companies would be paying for the app for specific individuals who are at high risk of cardiac arrest.
Got you. So do you have any insurance companies on board, or that's kind of a coming?
It's a coming kind of. We've been talking to some of them who a lot of have been working with remote monitors and so on, and they're interested in the idea. But again, I think it's more of we're gonna run some pilot.
Yeah, makes sense.
Sell it directly to some consumers, and then the next stage would be move to a B2B model with some insurance companies. And that's actually a pretty common kind of model for a lot of digital health companies.
Sure.
Like almost 60% of digital health companies start in a direct-to-consumer model.
Makes sense.
And then it ends up being 85% of them working with B2B. So it always starts with D2C, and then once you prove your value, then you can convert to B2B if you find insurance companies to work with. But that's what we're thinking.
No, that's awesome, man. So I'm curious, though, and I don't mean it to come across as negative, but how do you deal with if you help somebody and you save their life? I know, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that in a lot of cases, they need to consent to you to save them. Is that actually a real thing? Because it seems crazy to me that if I go into cardiac arrest, you save my life, but I never told you or gave you permission to touch me or not inappropriately, just like help me save my life, I could potentially sue you. Is that a reality or a thing that you guys have to worry about?
So throughout my experience, in cardiology and all that stuff, I think this is one of the things that has really been exaggerated out of context in general. Like you'll talk to people and they're like, "Oh, what about getting sued, whatever." But actually, it's interesting. It's I can answer the question in multiple levels. So number one, there are people who sign something called a DNR, do not resuscitate order.
Yeah.
So these are usually older individuals, have multiple diseases, and they acknowledge that their chances of having a good quality of life after cardiac arrest is very low. Sure. So they elect not to have to go through that. Sure. All right. So this, for example, terminal cancer patients or terminal heart disease patients, etc. Sure. A lot of them elect to do that. Okay. So if these people have a signed DNR order that people know about, and that is, let's say, if they're in a nursing home or in a hospital, etc. So people know about it, but they still perform CPR or try to resuscitate them. Now they can sue you for that, or the family can sue you because there's a clear will not to be resuscitated.
Got you.
However, in reality, most people, especially young, healthy, or people without significant disease, etc., they do not ask not to be resuscitated. So you actually can save them. And then in the US, there's something called the Good Samaritan laws.
Okay.
So Good Samaritan laws are applicable in several states in the country, and basically the Good Samaritan laws protect people from getting sued if they save others. So if you, with goodwill, save someone, who's having medical problem, etc.,
Yeah.
the Good Samaritan law protects you from getting sued. So that's one.
Okay, so it's basically a non-issue then, it sounds like, right? Or the chances are so low that it's not even worth thinking about.
Exactly. And then in reality, when, if you save someone's life,
yeah,
even if, something happens, like, let's say you fracture a rib while you're doing CPR, I mean, that's a normal complication of cardiac. No one can sue you.
Okay.
But even if that happens, usually the patient is grateful that their life has been saved.
Sure.
So that's one thing. And then on the other hand, if, the CPR is unsuccessful and, you cannot save the patient, you have not disrupted the usual standard of care, which is the ambulance coming in. You just provided extra step of help. So it's hard to have, even if someone sues you, it's really difficult to have a successful lawsuit in this situation because, someone has done their best with good intentions.
Okay. No, I thought it made sense to cover that just because I've heard those like horror stories, but then I've also heard people that are fit and healthy go into cardiac arrest and pass away. And if somebody was around to help them, they could potentially still be here today, okay.
Yeah. And then the last thing is we also have, like, we've been working with lawyers, and we also have insurance coverage just in case someone gets into some kind of, lawsuit or something.
Gotcha.
We have all that stuff. So we really care and have put a lot of effort into making sure that our medical professionals are kind of legally protected against any of that stuff.
No, I think that's really great. So I'm curious, you got accepted into this accelerator, but how did you fund the first version of Ember? Did you self-fund? Did you raise a bit of money? Walk us through that.
Yeah, so actually the accelerator, it's called IndieBio, and it's part of the SOSV accelerator in San Francisco.
Right.
It's a life sciences accelerator. They take 15 companies every 6 months in a 3 to 4 month program. And part of the accelerator is getting $250,000 in funding.
Okay, very cool.
So it's kind of other accelerators like Y Combinator, etc., with more of a biology/health focus with the money. So that's the kind of the pre-seed money that we got.
Okay,
and
cool.
They have a demo day. So our CEO Shadi presented on demo day, which was early November, and now we're raising a seed round.
Okay, very cool.
To keep going.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So I'm curious then to know, can people use Ember for other medical emergencies?
Well, that is exactly what we're thinking to do next. So again, the way this started, the vision was, we're using this wave of technology to kind of just completely transform and modernize the way pre-hospital emergency care is delivered. And we just started with sudden cardiac arrest, just given that it's the most devastating and the survival rates are just shockingly and devastatingly low. So that was a good place to start. And then what we want to do next is expand to other medical emergencies. So that includes other life-threatening medical emergencies. So, for example, we're interested in responding to opioid overdose. So now there's a as I'm sure you're aware,
it's huge.
Yeah, it's been huge in the U.S. over the past few years. Devastating. Actually, because of it, their survival, the mortality rates in the U.S. have been increasing over the past 3-4 years. And now there's a push to actually release intranasal naltrexone, which is the antidote to opioids, if you will.
Right.
So it's going to be available over the counter. So the way we envision this is that we'll be sending a medical professional to the victim who passed out or who's having a significant medical problem, a life-threatening emergency, where every minute counts. Sure. And then I imagine a future where we'll be going to be sending a first aid kit to that same location. And I envision a future where we send it through drones.
Interesting.
and through even maybe things like scooters. Like we've
Sure.
been birds and limes all over California right now, and we're thinking of having some stations with these first aid kits, and then someone can deliver them to the location. And if this is done efficiently, with good kind of algorithms and so on, we can definitely respond within probably 3 to 5 minutes to every life-threatening medical emergency there is.
Sure.
So
Interesting.
yes. So that's one part of it. Now, the second part of it is the non-life-threatening emergency. So that's a whole other kind of disastrous problem in the US. So, inappropriate ER visits. So that means that people who go to the ER when they should have not, they should have rather gone to the urgent care or seen their primary care physician.
Sure. Like if they have a rash or something, I've been in the
Exactly.
ER before where somebody's just waiting and you're like, well, you just have you're going to just get like a cream for that. Right?
Exactly.
Like, yeah. Okay.
Exactly. So this constitutes, depending on the study, around 40 to 70% of ER visits. So
that high?
Yes, it is ridiculous.
Wow.
It's an $18 billion problem every year.
Wow.
And of course, other than the money that's wasted, it stresses the ER systems,
Sure.
increases the waiting times in the ERs.
Yeah, for people that really need it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
and takes away help from people who need it. So that's one side where a lot of people are going to the ER when they should have not. Besides, what people don't realize is an ER visit on average costs $1,500.
Wow.
If you had gone to urgent care instead, that would have been on average $100.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize the difference.
No, it's ridiculous in the US. It's a ridiculous problem. We've done some surveys, and there were stories from people who were in Vegas and had a strep throat, went to the ER, and they got a $4,000 bill.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a ridiculous problem, and people don't really realize it, But even some insurance companies right now are starting to charge kind of fines for people who go to the ER when they shouldn't have. Okay. So that's one part of the problem. And the second part is there's others who, let's say someone is having a heart attack and they actually have chest pain, but they're like, what, I don't want to go to the ER, I don't want to wait in line, and what happens is you end up seeing them 2 days later, and it's already too late. You can't fix that heart attack. So the damage is already done. So you get kind of, this whole problem with inefficiency of emergency care, and its two sides is there. So what we're trying to do with Ember 2 is that the way I see this is we see this as a essential app on everyone's phone, just one app, kind of like, again, Lyft or Uber, or if you use Twitter or whatever, and you use that app whenever you have a medical emergency, any kind of medical emergency.
Sure.
And you get connected to, again, doctors, nurses, or paramedics who live around you and can help you navigate what to do. So if it's a life-threatening emergency, they're coming to you, they're saving your life before the ambulance comes in. If it's a non-life-threatening emergency, they're helping you figure out whether you should see your doctor tonight,
right?
Whether you should go to urgent care, ER, what kind of transportation you should use. So should I call an ambulance, or can I just call an Uber and use an Uber or a Lyft to go to the hospital?
Sure.
So we help them with all these things. And a lot of people actually use Dr. Google, as we call it, to figure out what to do, figure out the symptoms. And my experience has been patients always have trouble navigating the internet. They end up seeing this, like getting fixated on the scariest diseases. And rather than, kind of, no, this is a common cold, they're thinking, oh, this might be cancer. And they get concerned. So this also gives them a real person on the other side of, the phone, or, even through video or chat, who can help them very quickly navigate, whether they should be concerned or not, etc.
Yeah, that's fair. I know, like, anytime you Google something medical related, you can almost make anything out to be the worst possible scenario, right? And you get freaked out. Like, yeah, it's quite fascinating how that kind of, that it probably is not helping the medical profession when people play Google MD themselves, right?
Exactly. So that's the, and again, these are things that people don't think about much, but it's something that, I've seen in clinical practice a lot. And it's a problem, again, that is, making emergency care very, very inefficient. And a lot of money is just wasted there. So that's what we're trying to do. So eventually just one app on your phone, it's kind of like Uber, it takes you through a few questions, and through these questions helps determine what kind of care you should get, whether someone should come to you right away, save your life, or whether someone should chat with you and kind of figure out what the next steps are.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So
Yep,
how
yep.
soon do you think you guys will be outside of the Bay Area and beyond?
So right now we are working on, again, we're going to start the piloting with San Mateo, or
Right.
kind of Northern California area, in the next
Sure.
month or so. But we're also discussing some collaborations in Florida and in New York,
Okay.
also to run kind of some pilots. And I think over the next few months, as we make sure that the cardiac arrest part is working, etc., and as we raise more money, then we'll start working on the triage or the telehealth component of it. So I think I'm hoping that it will be out for people to use in the next 3-4 months, and then the triage part, hopefully by the end of 2019 we should have it up and rolling. And then interestingly too, we're also working with some international partners,
Okay.
such as Singapore and
Very cool.
and Qatar.
Okay.
So Singapore and Qatar have a centralized healthcare system, so it makes it much easier to navigate versus the US.
Okay. What does that mean for people that don't know what that means?
So it means that, so in the US, every county has its own EMS system.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
So
Interesting.
yeah, so literally, if you want to work with EMSs, you have to just go from one county to the other,
Wow.
kind of trying to show them how Ember can help save the community, et cetera, and its value.
Okay.
Versus countries like Singapore, Qatar, where they have that problem, and even Singapore, for example, traffic is really bad. That ambulance times are usually 20 to 30 minutes.
Wow.
Although it's a very tech savvy population, they know how to use the apps. They said that they have a lot of defibrillators, but their problem is the ambulance times.
Wow.
So if you provide that intervention where your neighboring doctor or nurse can save your life until the ambulance comes in, this can be really, really beneficial to their community.
Got you.
And Qatar is the same kind of thing. But what's interesting is, which is something that you might find interesting too. Are you a soccer fan at all?
I used to play as a kid. I don't really follow it, to be 100% honest with you.
No.
But
No, it's okay. So the World Cup
Sure.
is coming in 2022 in Qatar. And
Okay.
as you know, in 2026, it's actually going to be in North America, right? So it's going to be in Canada, the US, and Mexico.
Oh.
So what?
Okay. Very
Yeah,
cool.
yeah. So what we're trying to do with Qatar right now is we're trying to work with them on the idea of using our app during the World Cup. So let me tell you how that works. So of course, in any large, sports event, and it's actually
Yeah.
a month-long event, there are millions of fans pouring in the country, usually like 1 to 3 million.
Sure.
So those fans, first of all, they don't know where any of the hospitals or ERs or whatever are in Qatar. Second of all, they have there's a language barrier, right?
Oh, sure.
Right? And then third of all, also there's been some studies, such as one from Germany's World Cup in 2006, showing that the rate of cardiac events doubles or triples during the World Cup. And that's because people get so emotional and all that.
Right. Sure.
Yeah, so now there's these fans who are at high risk of cardiac events, and they're in a country and they don't know how to navigate the medical system.
Right.
So
Interesting.
what we're trying to do is, what we're proposing here is that every fan coming to Qatar would have the FIFA World Cup app on their phone, shows them where
Sure.
the stadiums are, activities are, etc. But they would also have this essential medical emergency app that they can access whenever there's a medical emergency.
Sure.
And that would be connected to medical professionals in Qatar.
Sure.
So it would identify their exact locations right away, so they
Sure.
don't have to describe where they are, which can be so difficult when you're in
Sure.
a different country.
Yeah.
And it also goes through language barriers because we'll have different languages.
Sure.
And it provides and then connects you with the local medical professionals who can come in, again, save your life if it's a cardiac arrest before the ambulance comes in, or even, talk to you about what to do, maybe even come visit you, do a concierge home visit if it's like a fever or something, which can be, treated with some antibiotics or something like that.
Sure.
So that's what we're trying to work with Qatar on. It would be the first time that anyone does something like this for a large scale sports event.
That's very cool.
And I can envision that, if it works well, which I think it will, if we apply it, it's going to save a lot of lives. And, it will also help people focus on what they enjoy most, which is the World Cup.
Sure.
And then if it works, then, we can, consider trying it in other events like the Olympics, like,
Sure.
world forums or events that, where there's a lot of visitors and so on. And then, of course, imagine how it would work for people traveling from one country to the other. Let's say you travel to, Italy or something,
Sure.
what happens, and that's something that people don't think about. What happens if you have a medical emergency?
Yeah.
You don't know the language, you don't know what number to call, you can't describe where you are. So, naturally the outcomes of any life-threatening emergency are going to be bad.
Yeah, no, fair enough. So eventually, would you guys potentially build in Google Translate or some other translating service too, so you could potentially live translate on the fly?
Well, that's what we're hoping to do. Again, this is going to be kind of a platform, which, again, the value of it is the people who run it.
Sure.
And then the software itself is going to, we're going to have some algorithms in it. We're going to, connect it to translating services and all that stuff. So that's how we envision it, the long-term vision.
Okay. So eventually, would you potentially roll this out to hospitals or other kind of care facilities so they could almost monitor their patients or the people living at those facilities? Because I could see that tie in as well.
Yes. No, that's definitely an interesting point. I think as we continue to move forward, especially as we integrate with, again, smart wearables or, implantable sensors or so, I think a lot of hospitals might find it interesting. So, for example, like I'll tell you, in cardiology, there are these patients who are at high risk of cardiac arrest, but they're not high risk enough that they would qualify for an implantable defibrillator.
Gotcha.
I'm not sure if you've heard of an implantable defibrillator, but it's like pacemakers or so.
Okay.
So they're high risk enough, but they don't qualify for implantable defibrillators because these come with their own risk. So maybe these people, what we do in them is implant a sensor and then have a defibrillator close by. And then what happens is if cardiac arrest is detected, then the system is notified, someone comes to their rescue with the defibrillator and they can save their life. So there are patient populations where we think might benefit from this kind of platform. And of course, as we keep developing this, imagine what hospitals can do in terms of reaching to their communities.
Sure.
So, for example, I'll give an example of the Cleveland Clinic because that's where I used to work.
Okay.
So Cleveland Clinic has all these hospitals, right, in the Cleveland area and the surrounding areas. But, it's hard for them to reach out to the communities in the rural areas, and even if they do, it's usually like small centers or so. Now, imagine they roll a platform like this to their patients all over in the rural areas. So what happens is a lot of their physicians and a lot of their nurses and a lot of their paramedics also tend to live in these areas.
Sure.
So what happens is if we work with hospitals, then suddenly hospitals don't only take care of patients in the hospitals, but they're also taking care of them outside the hospital.
Sure.
And then, of course, also on the other hand, for the medical professionals, it's a good opportunity to make an extra gig, right? It's the whole gig economy that Lyft, Uber, Airbnb came up with. You can be at home and you can, make money taking phone calls or make more money actually going to patients and responding in person.
Sure.
So that's how we see this eventually kind of coming, again, being something that really brings the medical professionals to their neighbors, close to their neighbors, in their communities outside the hospital.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I think that's really awesome what you guys doing with the platform. I think it's a much needed thing globally, right? And there's very
That
few companies that can have basically a global impact overnight, right?
Yes, yes. No, it's gonna take time. It's gonna take a
Sure.
lot of effort. But I think, you know, this is it's a very brave idea too, because a lot of companies are always scared about dealing
Sure.
with the legal implications and all this stuff, which is definitely a reasonable, thing to think about. And
Sure.
again, we're gonna have coverage and all this stuff. But, how long are we gonna continue to be scared of this? This is a huge problem, needs to be fixed.
Yeah.
I'm surprised that it hasn't been fixed so far.
Sure.
And to be honest, I think that's where the future is going. If you ask me, if in 10 years to 20 years time, if let's say, we you know we don't make it.
Okay.
If in 10 years time no one else does something like this, I'll be so surprised. It will mean that we have completely failed as a health community and as a tech community. Because it's one of those things where it's a low-hanging fruit. Technology
Sure.
is there. We're riding on multiple waves of technology that are coming up. All we're doing is just setting up the platform, kind of like, again, what Lyft or Uber have done over the past few years. So
Yeah.
I think it's something that's coming.
No, that makes sense. And I also think too, to your point, the fact that companies like Apple are starting to build in heart sensors. Well, I guess it's been around for a while now, and Google's kind of doing that as well, and Fitbit and all those other have.
Yes.
So I think though it's becoming more and more accepted, and people are actually buying these watches or other devices that they wear on their bodies outside the tech community, right? And so I
Yes.
think
Yes.
people are more and more open to technology being on them and around them and using technology, especially when it can save their life or make them healthier. Where I think maybe a decade or so ago, a lot of people would be like, well, I don't want that. I don't need that, right? Where it's becoming such
Exactly.
a commonplace now that the average person feels more comfortable with this thing. And I think there's a large percentage of the population, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, that would potentially implant something in them to notify somebody that if they go through something that they need somebody to come immediately to save their life, right? I think people are scared about implanting stuff in a lot of cases, but if it's something that could save their life, I think a lot of people would do that. And it sounds like you found that as well.
Yes, I mean, there's no doubt that what you're saying is true. I mean, there was just an article yesterday about how by the end of 2019, it's estimated that almost 1 in every 10 Americans will have a smart wearable.
Sure.
And the trend is growing globally. And all these tech companies, as you said, they know that this is coming. So that's the first wave. And then that's going to be definitely followed by a wave of implantable sensors. Because, again, this is where the future is going. It's
Sure.
this passive monitoring of your health. You're doing whatever you're doing in life, but somewhere, somehow, usually probably through AI algorithms and so on, there's continuous monitoring of your health.
Sure.
And part of it is monitoring when devastating medical emergencies like cardiac arrest occur, when your heart stops,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And this is step one. Step two is connecting you to 911 and the doctor who lives next to you, because they can literally come in, save your life.
Yeah. No, that makes
And
sense.
then, yes, and then step three is maybe even delivering the first aid equipment to you
Sure.
via drones, via, again, like transportation means that are faster than an ambulance.
Yeah.
So this is like, I mean, again, this is me sitting there and, just imagining how beautiful the future is going to be.
Oh, I love it.
And I think, again, as Uber has and Lyft have proven it to us over the past few years, right? Like,
Sure.
no one would have ever thought that, we would see, cars coming towards us to pick us up and so on. And this is just how I see this eventually turning out in the next 5 to 10 years.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense, right? And it's going to be interesting to see how the whole thing plays out, because I think it's much needed, and also potentially having the ability to have my medical records pulling into your app,
Yes.
so certain people can have access to it as long as I allow it, right?
Yes.
I know some people would
Yes.
say no, but if the person that shows up to my house to save my life knows my medical history or enough information to make the right call, then I think that could be really useful for you guys as well, right?
100%. So part of what we're building is this: we're gathering kind of basic medical information
Sure.
about the patient, so that again, it's very useful for the person saving their life to come to have.
Sure.
And then also, I don't know if you know or not, but Apple has been working on their on like their own EHR or kind of medical record on the Apple phone.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah.
Yep. And actually what they did was they're opening up the API for third-party developers.
Oh, interesting.
So again, as long as the person, the individual gives that app access to their information on the Apple Health, we can extract that. So I think, again, this is us, and using multiple technologies that are coming out. So as Apple builds that too, and as more people tend to have all this information on their phones, we can also pull that information in the setting of medical emergency and send it to the medical professional.
Very cool, man. But we're kind of coming to the end of the show. So let's close with mentioning where people can get more information about you guys and any other links you want to mention.
Yes. So first of all, thank you, Kevin, for hosting me. It's been really wonderful sharing this with you.
Perfect. It's been great.
And for anyone who's interested, they can visit our website, which is www.embermed.com. And our Twitter account is @EmberMedical. My personal Twitter account is MB Elshazly. And that's where you can find any information that you would like about us. And then if you're a medical professional and you're listening to us, you can start downloading our app so that you'll have it on your phone. You'll register, and then once we're ready to kind of get to work in your area, then we'll also contact you and let you know.
Perfect, man. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time of your day to be on the show, and I look forward to keeping in touch with you. And have a good rest of your day, man.
Awesome. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
You too. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. Please visit our website at buildingthefutureshow.com to join the free community, sign up for our newsletter, or to sponsor the show. The music is done by Electric Mantra. You can check him out at electricmantra.com and keep building the future.